Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. So I am really excited about this video. I've been going back and forth between doing it or not, but it's something that's been in my heart for a while, and it took me a long time to kind of do it also because I never want to come off as I am, judging any other, mom or any other parent for how they choose to bring their baby into this world. Ultimately, it's your choice. For those moms or parents that just want to hear somebody else's experience, I feel like we learn by experience too. We learn from other people's stories. I hope that you hear my heart because that's basically, the reason that I'm doing this video. Most of the things I will be sharing are my experience, my opinions, how I felt. If that brings any clarity for you in your birthing journey, then great. But if you're like, that's totally not how my experience was, that's totally not how I felt, that's okay too. I also will be sharing some evidence-based data with you guys that I got from a couple of resources, and just to kind of be informed. I feel like there was a lot of things that I didn't even know had my first birth. So yeah, I hope this video encourages you in some way. Any questions that maybe is something I did talk about in the video, or any just questions that you might have, feel free to leave it in the comments below. All right, let's get started. I have my notes here, of course. So as you can tell by the title of this video, I will be sharing my hospital birth experience and my home birth experience. So my daughter, I had her in the hospital, and my son I had at home. So first I want to talk about the hospital birth, and I might go back and forth. I don't have like a structure of how I want to do this. Yeah, just how those two experiences were different, because they were very, very different in a lot of ways. Ultimately, they were the same in that they brought me the best babies and the sweetest babies in the world. Regardless of how the experience was, the moment they put that baby in your arms, the moment they put my daughter on my chest, I get teared up just thinking about it. It's the best feeling in the world. So just really quick to give you guys a backstory, when I got pregnant in 2020, I already knew that I wanted to go about this in a more natural way. And what I mean by natural is I didn't want to have interventions. So for that would be like, for example, an epidural. I really wanted to go and experience that pain and work through it. And so that was always my plan. I did want to originally start with a birthing center. I wasn't all the way confident in giving birth at home. I didn't just have, again, the confidence in myself. And a lot of it for me came from just seeing birth. Like, I just imagined this chaos and this pain, and I didn't know if I would be able to handle it. And hearing experiences from other moms or other people, I was just like, oh, I don't know if I want to have my first one at home. I just don't feel confident. So I looked for a birthing center. That didn't work out. I went to the next best thing, which is a nurse midwife. So a nurse midwife, they got their nursing degree, and then they went and did a specialization in midwifery. I really loved her. She, I went into her appointments. She had her own practice, and I never felt rushed. I always feel heard, and like she understood, and she gave time to like really sit with me, answer my questions. And she never pushed any like medical like thing, like, oh, think about C-section, think about epidurals, all that stuff. Like, I always went in with my birth plan. I want to not have an epidural if we can avoid it, not have any interventions. And she always said, I'm very hands-off, and I really appreciated that. The 27th of December, which was, quote unquote, my due date, and I do it in quotes because that's another thing. Like, I can go on a tangent about due dates, and but it's more of a guess date than a due date. We went to sleep around like midnight. I remember that night, and I just was not able to fall asleep. I kept feeling contractions, and they were sporadic at first, and like around 3 a.m. I was just like, I could not fall asleep. I'm in pain, and they feel like they're escalating. So I called my midwife, and she's like, it's fine, go to the hospital and they'll check you there, and by check she means they check how much you're dilated, and that's what I did. I got to the hospital like around 4:30. I was only at a 2 dilated, which again felt a little discouraging, but there's so much that goes into where your baby's at. Like dilation is just one aspect of it, and I won't get too much into like all of that, but that's the one thing I would say start right off the bat. With hospitals, there's always like, it felt like it's always, everything was like an emergency where it's like, you know, you need to be progressing, you need to be like, something needs to be happening. And so that's how I felt right off the bat. Labor and delivery nurses were all really, really kind though, so that I appreciated. But yeah, it did feel like, okay, you know, things need to be moving, I'm gonna be checking on you often, and like something needs to be happening. So that's the EFMs, which are the, you know, that constantly monitor, you know, the baby. And I was like, I can't move. So right away you're like strapped to the bed, you can't move. And movement is what helps labor progress. That's one big thing where there's no evidence that shows that monitoring the baby that constantly does any, like, prevents anything from happening, as opposed to the hands-on listening, which a lot of home birth midwives use, which is just the Doppler. And when I went into labor with Moon, my son, she was checking me like every 30 minutes. They did a randomized testing of 12 women, one getting constant and the other one the hands-on, and neither of them showed that there was any difference in the APGAR scores, any difference in like low oxygen, needing to be admitted to the NICU, a stillbirth. There was no difference between the two. Actually, what did increase in the constant one was the likely of needing a cesarean, needing forceps, needing a vacuum, because sometimes the baby's heart rate will fluctuate, and again I use quotes, and they feel like there needs to be something happening. We need to, you know, get the baby out because the heart rate has dropped. So the case, it's not even that much of an emergency. Right away I was like, why do I need to be strapped to the bed? I want to be moving. Luckily, I did have some information on that. They have a portable monitor. So I did ask for that, and the nurses were so mad at me because it kept coming in and out, the reading. And so just think about it. I mean, they can all be in the center of the lobby listening. Everybody's hooked up, they can hear everybody at once. And if you start to really think about it, is the constant monitoring better for you or comfortable for the health person? So I had my portable monitor, I was able to move, time was passing, so of course they're like, okay, we need to put you on Pitocin because you're not dilating. So right away it's like fear. It's like, okay, like, should I be dilating? Like, why am I not? And of course I went in with a lot of research. I'm just that type of person that likes to research, but at the same time it's kind of that fear of like, well, you know, do I know everything? Am I in control here? Like, they're the professionals, so I guess I do need the Pitocin. And you know, at this point it had been like a few hours already. I think it was like around noon, and I got there, mind you, at 4:30. So all this time had passed, and I still, no baby, still in the hospital. And I know I probably, now that I've like had a second baby, I probably went in too early. Like, that could happen sometimes. You could start contracting, and then what happened is my contractions started to slow down. And so yeah, I could see where I went in too early. Now we're gonna have to use an intervention. And the thing what happens is when you're at a hospital, you go in with your plan. No, I'm not gonna get Pitocin, I'm not gonna get epidural. I want a, you know, intervention-free birth. Hospitals were made for interventions. Do I think that there's some medical reasons that some people need to have their baby in the hospital and have interventions? Sure. Like, you know, one size doesn't fit all. But again, the majority of the times, you know, you go in there, you're a low risk pregnancy, all of a sudden now it's like high risk. All of a sudden, like, oh, your baby's too big. All of a sudden, like, all these different things that they start putting in your mind. and you're like, oh, I do need that, then I do need this, I do need that, and before you know it, like, your birth plan went out the window. And so that's what was happening to me. My birth plan was going out the window because literally as soon as I started the Pitocin, the contractions became unbearable. Like, I was literally, I remember I asked one of the nurses to bring me a birth ball. Again, they were really sweet. They did bring me the birth ball. She's like, are you okay? Like, you know, they kind of start asking you, do you want something for the pain? And, you know, they didn't literally go on, do you want an epidural? But they start kind of like, you know, insinuating that you could use something. And I was like, I'm fine. And I was like little tears running down my cheeks. And after a while, I was like, I cannot handle the pain anymore. Like, it's just too, which is what Pitocin, you know, in that stage does. It increases your contractions, you can dilate more, and it's unbearable, you know? So I had the epidural, and not only did I have it, but I had to have it again because it only got one side of my of my back, and I could feel the whole other side, and it was like inflamed. So I had to get it redone. It was, at this point I was like, I'm just done. Like please, like I just want to have this baby. Like, it was something, just kind of a work rather than, okay, I'm it hurts, I'm in pain, but I can handle it. I'll just, at this point with my son's birth, so I started contracting like around 11 at night with him. My midwife showed up 11:30, and he was born at 3:30 that morning, so 5 hours. 5 hours, that's it. From like the first contraction to when he came into this world. And I had, without any interventions, without any epidural or pain medication, all natural. Did it hurt? Yes, ma'am, sir, it did. Would I do it again? 1000%, because it was a pain I was actually able to manage. And what a lot of people don't share with you is that the pain is a good thing. Like, there's a reason why it hurts. Being, you know, a Christian and believing God's word, like, I know women were like given that pain in labor, but I don't see it as a curse. Like, you know, it's not something that's like, oh, you know, I want to come in, get me the epidural, I don't want to feel a thing. Like, there's a reason that that pain is there, and that's to help you get into a position and be connected to your baby, and get into a position where you can give birth in the optimal way. So for me, like, with Moon having that pain, I knew where to go, I knew what to move, and I knew when it was the right time. Okay, now I have to, like, he's ready to come out. With the epidural, it's not. It's, they're watching it on a monitor. Okay, the contractions were increasing. Let me check you. Okay, you're dilated. Now you're ready. Now let's push. And that was the next thing. Birthing positions. I read this book, and I'm gonna link it below because it was honestly one of the best books I read on my second birth. And it has a really cool name. It's called Babies Are Not Pizzas. They're Born, Not Delivered. And which I thought was super clever. It was written by, I don't remember her name right now, but she is, you know, she was a nurse. She was also a PhD, and she taught in university, you know, like all the medical stuff. So after she had her first baby in the hospital, the whole thing, she's like, wow, there are so many things that the hospital does that there's actually no real evidence to support it, you know, to support like that extremity. So one of the things is the constant fetal monitoring. Another thing is the position that you give birth. 90% of the women in the hospital give birth lying down, right? So you lie all the way down with your legs up, or like semi-sitting position. That is the worst position to give birth in. Like, why are more people talking about this? We're not given a choice many times. Like, it's just like lie down, or we don't even know this information, so we don't ask for it, you know. And you can totally give birth in however position you want. Like, no one can make you give birth lying down. It's just more comfortable for the provider. You're in an upright position, on your side or on your, you know, 4 legs, or even standing up. It actually opens your pelvis more. It gives more oxygen to your baby because you're not compressing your aorta, which is like the main vein of your body. It's actually less painful, it lowers your pain levels, and actually it's worse for the baby, like, because you have less oxygen and the baby has less oxygen. And many times it's happened, oh, the baby's oxygen levels are going down. We need to use, a forceps or vacuum, or, we need to move you in to have an emergency C-section. If you're watching this and that's happened to you, like, I'm so sorry, because you did not have the information, or the healthcare provider didn't give you the information or the opportunity to birth your baby, in the way that it was possible. I've read, stories and things. There's so many things that go wrong just because of that one decision. It's not like a lot of moms make it seem like, oh yeah, I scheduled my cesarean. It's like I scheduled my nail appointment. No, it's not like that at all. There's so many things that, from like the lack of breastfeeding, like it's because of all the antibiotics that you take so that your stitches won't get infected, and then your milk doesn't come in, and you can't breastfeed properly, so you have to use formula, and just like that, all those interventions actually do more harm than good. So I almost want to say, like, wake up, and it's okay to have your epidural, have the Pitocin, have the cesarean. It's your choice at the end, but just know that it's gonna come with consequences, and are you willing to be okay with those consequences? Like, if you're fine with it, then okay, but just know that anything that is not your body's natural course of action, it's gonna have a consequence. Now, sometimes it's necessary, but the majority of the time it is not. Like, there's no reason that 30% of all births are cesarean births. Why? Like, why is that a thing? I remember the year that I gave birth to Ocean, my daughter, there were 5 other moms just within my church alone that were pregnant as well. 4 of them were cesareans. Out of 6 women giving birth that year, all within the same community, only 2 were vaginal, 4 of them were cesarean. Why? Like, have we ever stopped to think, like, why is that the case? Yeah, so I laid down, I pushed for like 45 minutes, and out came the most beautiful baby girl in the entire planet. One other thing, I wanted delayed cord clamping. It was like a 5-minute delayed cord clamping. Like, okay, we delayed the cord clamping. No, like, that's the other thing. And this is with me, you guys, having a midwife as a care provider. So I can't even imagine just a regular OBGYN. I know not all OBGYNs are created equal, but that's with someone like, I'm very hands-off, I'm very like, let your body do you, and I had all the interventions known to man. Pitocin, epidural, there was no delayed cord clamping like I had written in my birth plan. And I just like, really? And then comes the breastfeeding. And again, I'm gonna tread lightly with this because I know it is a sensitive subject for many women, and I don't want to downplay your experience if you decide not to breastfeed, if you're not breastfeeding, if you're formula feeding, bottle feeding, pumping, whatever you're feeding your baby. Again, it is your choice and it is your decision, and we need to respect our decisions that we make for our kids, regardless if we agree or not. So you don't have to agree with me. Do I support breastfeeding? 100%. But that's that's me based on my own personal beliefs, and also different things I've read that support breastfeeding over formula feeding. I had read about kind of breastfeeding, but that was something that I just did not know anything about. I had to learn how to do it, and it was very difficult with Ocean. She did not latch right away. I remember she was born at 11:30. It was like around 4 something. Oh, that's the other thing. None of the nurses knew how to help me to get her to latch. It was until the next morning that the lactation specialist, which she was an angel, she helped me. But I do remember that night, like at 4:30 a.m., she woke up. She was hungry. Another thing, when babies are born, their stomachs are the size of a cherry, right? So they don't eat a lot. of milk. That's why you have colostrum, which is a concentrated form of milk, and that's exactly what the babies need in that time. Anyone that tells you otherwise is not looking out for your best interest, okay? If they tell you they need colostrum, but you need to supplement with formula, that is wrong. That's what the babies need, because that's what your body is providing for the baby, okay? So at around 4:30, she wakes up, she's hungry, poor thing, and I think she was just so hungry she did end up latching, and I was like, wow, it was such a surreal moment. The first moment that she latched and fed off of me, I was like, wow. And again, I'm getting teary up. This is what my breasts were made for, like, to provide for this human being, to keep this baby alive, and not just alive but thriving, because all the nutrients that my body has for this baby is exactly what they need. They don't need anything else. They don't even need water. Like, it's just amazing to me. I love breastfeeding. Next morning, the main nurse that was assigned to me, she's like, literally her greeting was like, "Good morning, how will you be supplementing today?" And I was like taken off guard. Mind you, I just gave birth, I had a sleepless night, all my hormones are everywhere, and that's the first thing that you say to me, like, how are you going to be supplementing? I was like, no, I'm breastfeeding. Oh, but if you're like, not going to supplement, then that's, the baby needs to eat and this and that. I was like, but the baby ate already. He's like, oh, well, did the baby eat again? I was like, no, I'm still figuring it out. So they sent over the lactation specialist. She just was amazing. She squeezed my breast and was like, oh, you've got plenty of milk, you're good, baby just needs to learn how to latch. So in the meantime, which I didn't know, which that was really cool, I want you to express the milk. Don't try to pump, don't try to bottle feed. Express the milk by hand into this little spoon, and literally, I was spoon feeding Ocean colostrum, which was great. So yeah, it was very difficult to breastfeed. I didn't know how to do it. Ocean, we had to try so many different, this is what my body was made to do. I will not give up. I'm gonna keep doing it. It's difficult. It's gonna be a difficult first few days until my milk comes in, until she gets used to it. But I can do this, and I feel like a lot of times as women, we don't have the confidence in ourselves to be able to feed our babies, so we rely on interventions like formula, and we are put fear in us by other professionals saying basically, if you don't give formula to your baby's gonna die, or your baby's gonna get sick. Why are we receiving this from other providers? No, my baby is not. I just need to learn how to do it. Now, the day that we were supposed to leave the hospital, afternoon, they did all the tests on her, the hearing test, the blood test, all of that. That same nurse, she came in with a Billy blanket, which is that blue light that the hospitals use. You see, I told you this is why you have to use formula, and that's why you have to supplement, because now we're gonna have to put baby under the light because the baby is yellow. I was like, okay. Again, I didn't know about bilirubin. Bilirubin, it's normal that it's a little bit high the first couple of days. It's because they're learning how to process the white blood cells. And I was like, okay, well, what was her score? 10.9. I was like, okay, what should have been? A 10. I'm like, really? And then after reading about it, I was like, well, what she needs is just to be out in the sun. No, the pediatrician that was there, no, that's a very small amount. This is a more concentrated amount, and she needs it, and because she can have brain damage. Why? Because her bilirubin's a little elevated. If it was at a 20 or okay, then there's something else going on. But she has 10.9. That's nothing. That's just part of her being born. She needs to breastfeed more, and she needs to poop it out, basically, and be out in the sun. But no, again, it made me feel like I was giving my baby brain damage if I didn't put her under this constant blue light. But you know what that is? That is more time in the hospital. so they can get more insurance money, and that's a rental of an extra equipment. Again, more money for the hospital. So I don't even want to get into it, but you be the judge. After a couple of days that we were there extra, I was like, okay. They said, oh yeah, she's getting better, but we want to check her one more time. I was like, no, there will be no more checking of her blood. They had already taken out so much blood off her tiny little foot, and I was done. I was like, I will follow up with a pediatrician, and that I had, selected, not the one that was in the hospital, and I am taking my baby and I am going home. And I told them just like that. And it was like midnight when we ended up leaving the hospital. And it just felt so nice. Once I got home, like, yeah, I didn't sleep for a few days. Yeah, the breastfeeding I was still working on. It took me, a week or so to get the hang of it. But I was just so happy to be home. I was like, this is what it should feel like. Like, these past few days, it hasn't been the birth or the lack of sleep that has had me just so, like, anxious and stressed. It's the hospital. It's the people there. It's the system. And it's just like, this is not what birth should be. This is not what, your first experience should be. And I had some trauma over that. Like, I remember I think it was like Friday. We left the hospital Wednesday, so it was like Friday. I just burst into tears, and Willie was like, what's wrong? I was just like, I just felt like we were never leaving. Like, it just felt like we just couldn't leave. And that just still stays with me, and I think about it, I'm like, they just made you feel like everything you do was wrong, like you had no instinct. They're the ones that know best, and whatever you don't listen to them is gonna kill your baby. And I was like, I said that I'm never doing that again. Fast forward to 2 years later, when I had my son, I knew it was gonna be a home birth, and it was not gonna have any interventions. I know home birth is not for every mom. For whatever your reasons are, that's okay. And I really recommend it to any expectant mother. I'm like, have your baby at home or at a birthing center, because you go in with a plan at the hospital to do it vaginally and without interventions, and it falls apart. It really, really does. It might not have happened to you, but in my experience and in everyone else's experience that I have spoken to over the years, that is what has happened, and that is what the hospital is made for. My son was born at 3:30. I was standing up when I had him, which, hey, gravity, right? Like I said, did it hurt? 1,000%. But it was a pain that was manageable, and of course, I prepared myself a lot beforehand. I prepared myself physically, just staying active in my health, eating the right foods, because all of that, yes, does contribute to, how your pregnancy is and how you're going to birth your baby. So definitely take care of yourself, take care of your body, because just like those interventions like Pitocin and epidural go straight from into your placenta and into your baby, so does all the food and all the cardio and all that you're doing is going to affect your pregnancy as well. And really quick on that, so I was reading about this with the epidural. So I'm looking up here on my phone, because one of the really good resources is Built to Birth in Instagram, and she's great. She doesn't advocate for like home births over hospital births, but she does give you like, neutral information, so that you do know, like, okay, this is what you're signing up for if you decide on a hospital birth. When women receive epidural or a high dose of epidural during labor, that can delay the lactation. So basically, it delays when your milk comes in. So I remember, again, I had a lot of colostrum, so thankfully that wasn't an issue. But with Ocean, my milk didn't come in until I think the 4th day, and with Moon it came in the next day I gave birth. So, coincidence? I think not. Another thing with breastfeeding is that, so right when you get to the hospital, they put you in an IV because to keep you hydrated. I did not have an IV when I was at home. I was sipping on water, sipping on coconut water, and I did not need like an IV put in me. But those that do when you're in the hospital, it can increase the fluid retention in your baby. So therefore it affects your baby's birth weight, and it inflates them so that you have a bigger birth weight. So when it goes down a few days later, because now they've lost all that inflammation, they're like, oh, your baby has lost weight, so you should give them formula so that you can increase the weight because the baby has lost weight. What? So what you guys give me to keep me hydrated has increased my baby's weight, and now that they're back to their actual weight, now I need to get something else that you guys give me, which is formula, so that I can keep my baby healthy. I'm just like confused and just so like, why is that? Like, why is this still happening? It's crazy because in the Babies Are Not Pizzas book, she goes on in the history of like how the OBGYNs took over, and because there was money to be made in giving birth, so they made the midwives look like dirty, ignorant people, immigrants that didn't know what they were doing. I mean, she goes into the whole history, and she talks about how there were some things that were done to moms during labor that are now like 30, 40, 50 years later illegal. Like, oh yeah, my bad, like that's not, we shouldn't have been doing that, that's actually harmful for the mother or the baby. Who's to say that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, things that they're doing now is not gonna later come out and be like, oh, oops, like that, we shouldn't have been doing that. Epidurals, Pitocin. There's so much evidence that those things have so many negative effects on the baby and on the mom as well. Like, onto so many facts, not just with breastfeeding, but with the other things. And we're allowing this to happen so that we don't have pain and labor. Don't go in blind. Don't go in thinking, oh, I can handle the pain, it's too much, like put the epidural in, get the baby out, however it comes out. Like, no, there are consequences to those decisions that you're making. So just make them and have a lot of wisdom behind that too. I said I was never going to give birth in a hospital again. At home, after I gave birth to my son, he came out beautifully just like my daughter did, but it was different. I'm not gonna lie, like, after the story that you guys have heard, like, it was different. I was in my own home, I got into my bed, I held him, there was no like lights, there was no one taking him away to weigh him or measure him, or, you know, I just had a sweet time just with him in my chest. Later I did leave him with Willie so that I could go shower. I showered in my own bathroom, got into my own pajamas and my own thing, and just laid in my bed. And my midwife weighed him, she measured him like hours later, and they were so sweet. They cleaned up there was a lot of blood, quite a bit of blood, which is normal, but they picked everything up, they threw it in the wash, which was really sweet of them. They cleaned up and they stayed with me. She made sure, so she did take my blood pressure right after, she took the baby's temperature, all of that. And the recovery, I mean, with Ocean, I wasn't too bad. I was walking around next day, but with Moon, I was like, you know, making breakfast. Like, it was just something that felt like just a normal occurrence in life. It wasn't this, obviously it's the most magnificent thing ever. I mean, just growing a human and giving birth to it, like, wow, you just did that. And then feeding it off your own body. I mean, come on. But at the same time, it's the most normal thing in the world. And what just gets me going with hospitals and just that whole medical side of it is that they make it like this medical thing, like this illness almost, like something that we need to cure you from. Like, you should be able to give birth and just be walking around and, like, yeah, you're sore and all of that, but it's not something to, you know, just be lying on a bed that you can't even move. Why does it have to be like, who said it has to be that way? The doctors? The nurses? Who? Like, why have we been convinced that this is the only way to give birth in a hospital with interventions, and it's like this recovery of like you just had surgery. I mean, with cesarean obviously you have, but why are we just buying into this?